You know the Magna culture, right? Nobody works for me. You people work with me. I'm working for you. The history of mankind has always been dominated by the golden rule. Here's the gold makes the rule. But I don't want to be dominated by anyone. If I feel that strong, I should not be able to dominate somebody either.
Thank you for joining us on The Road to Economic Freedom. My name is Iwona Stronach. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. I'm joined here with the founder of the Canadian Economic Charter, Frank Stronach. Frank Stronach is perhaps Canada's most successful entrepreneur who built Magna International from a small rented garage in downtown Toronto to a company with over $40 billion in sales and 180,000 employees. Today we'll be discussing some of the most important questions about the Canadian Economic Charter. Frank Stronach, as always, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Iwona. You always have interesting questions popping up, and they have to be answered.
Thank you.
I'm happy to provide an answer so people could understand what this is all about.
Yes, we get a lot of questions about the Canadian Economic Charter. It's based on 7 principles. It's solely economic. It's a nonpartisan movement, and it's based on the Magna corporate charter. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, as we got along in life, it's an evolutionary process. We experience certain things, and we all like to remember or bring forward the things which are positive, right? And so the very key is an economic charter of rights means we got to take a look at the economy, how the economy can function, right? And we got to be aware of it. Nature is always looking for balance, and fairness is a portion of balance. So really,
is that what inspired you to create the Canadian Economic Charter, is to bring fairness?
No, what inspired me to create the Economic Charter of Rights, we all go through phases, right? I've gone through phases where I experienced hunger, right? Hunger not because I wanted to lose weight. I was hungry because I had no money to buy food, right?
That leaves a lasting impression.
Remember, that's like burnt in your soul, and you remember that. And when you do well, I think you should think about it. What can you do that society can function better? And most of all, how can we eliminate poverty?
So is that the main goal of the Charter, is to eliminate poverty?
It's the main goal is to eliminate poverty, and it's 2 goals: to eliminate poverty, and that most Canadians should achieve economic freedom. That's really, if you're not economically free, you're not a free person, you're a servant, okay?
In simple terms, how would you define economic freedom?
Call it the minimum standards in economic freedom would be if a Canadian woman or Canadian man worked for 30 years, they should have enough accumulated that they own their own house. Might it be a small house or small condo, mortgage-free. And they should also have accumulated a minimum of $300,000 so they could subsidize the old age pension, and most of all, it would give senior citizens that they can choose their own road to happiness for the remaining years.
So who would benefit the most from an economic charter?
Who will benefit the most would be the working class, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And that is because of the profit-sharing component of the economic charter, or is it all 7 principles together benefit society?
Yes, the 7 principles, they each have a very important role to play, but in the final analysis, I think the easiest way for people to understand is when I usually say there's all the politicians agree on one thing, and it's very few items where politicians would agree, but one thing politicians agree, all of them, doesn't matter what party it is, with business people or most people, if the economy doesn't work, nothing else will work. So that's a very, but...
So why aren't the politicians focused on the economy? Why isn't their platform bringing in a Canadian economic charter? Why are we focused on so many other social issues and ignoring the economy?
Well, they don't understand the economy, right? But they understand if they would bring forward something new, they know they wouldn't be elected.
But if it would revolutionize this country, which the Canadian Economic Charter would, we would be the first country in the world to have a platform like this, then wouldn't that be something that would gain support publicly for a new politician?
Well, look, I don't want to brag, but I think I've achieved incredible things here, like you said, starting in a garage and built up a company to 180,000 employees. That's all known in Canada. It's all known to every prime minister, everything. But, none of them called me and say, Frank, how was the day? What was the main factor? What was it, right? It's not, there's something you miss, right? Because you as a businessman, if somebody runs a great business, you want to ask him, right? How could I do the same thing or whatever, right? So, and I'm wide open. I would be very happy to explain what we have to do to run a great country.
And this is the blueprint of what we have to do.
This is a blueprint, yes. So there's some 7 principles which I chose 7 principles because they're purely economics. They're not political principles, and because Canada really isn't on a good economic foundation, right? And you gotta have a foundation. Everything in life, its functions gotta have a foundation. Right, so it's so very important that we say, what do we have to do that we can get Canada back on a solid foundation, economic foundation?
So for the average person who doesn't think about the economy day to day, who is working class, who is making enough to make ends meet, why should they support the economic charter?
Well, it's so obvious now. When I listen to young couples, my parents could afford to buy a home, but I got to live in my parents' house, and I'm trying to get a family, and I can't, so I don't know, we can't afford. So the living standards, I would say, have gone down maybe 40–50% over the last 50 years. So it's just huge, right? And it's gone further down because what makes it go down is because debt's rising, the imports are rising, and the bureaucracy is rising. It's like a freight train going down the hill with no brakes on.
But most Canadians, I think, are just used to the system being the way that the system is. We pay a lot in taxes, we pay a lot for the food that we purchase. Would this have an immediate effect if we instated an economic charter? Would our living standards really increase drastically or within a short period of time?
It would not immediately, the economy doesn't turn around that quick, right? But it would have, if we start in a few years, we would get solid results, right? So, but we gotta go to the basics. Why? Why has Canada wound up that way, where a young couple, an ordinary couple, could not afford to buy a house, right?
And what do you think is the main reason Canada has ended up
this
far off track?
The main reasons is governments got too big. And I've always said I could work in a factory and I don't have to look at the financial books, and I could tell if that factory will make monies or not. If I see more people in the offices and less people on the factory floor, I know that company will not make a profit or very little. So basically, we have less and less working people. We have more and more regulated. So governments got too big. You know, with all the programs, with all the funding, with all the, it's just, there's nothing left for the working class.
How did we let it get this far? Why didn't we not rein this in before government got so big?
Those are such good questions, right? I mean, but it's when you take a look, one of the key problems is that governments can't balance their budgets, or very few for the last 50 or 60 years. Maybe a couple of times the budgets get balanced. So every time, when they form their budgets, they borrow, right? Mm-hmm. And when you borrow, like if you have a house, and you borrow more and more, right? And when you borrow more than what your income is, mm-hmm. you lose everything. Mm-hmm. Okay, mm-hmm. But the problem with governments is they can print more and more and more and more monies. Mm-hmm. Okay, mm-hmm. And that gets worse and worse. The hole gets deeper, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. It's more difficult. For if young people would ask you, well, how can we ever pay that gigantic debt back, right? It's worse than a mortgage.
It's something we can't walk away from.
No, from a mortgage you can walk away from, but mm-hmm. if a country is debt, the future generation has to pay it. I've never seen a bank yet forgiving debt, right?
Do you think if we don't instill an economic charter in Canada, Canada could see or experience bankruptcy in the future?
There's from time to time, there's many countries which have experienced bankruptcies, and the things will be very tough and very stringent and very tough, right? So we got to avoid that, and I think if we analyze the economic charter, I think I could demonstrate that we could avoid bankruptcy.
You don't think it's too late?
It's you got to have hope, tangible hope, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's feasible if we within the next year or two, if we adopt the economic charter, and I think we could turn the ship around and get Canada back on a sound economic footing.
Would this keep the politicians accountable?
Well, right now they're not accountable, right? So this here where we say, look, where you have some freedoms, you also got to have some duties, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And or responsibilities. So basically, the two key pointers in there is that the principle number one is Canada must have a balanced budget and must eliminate debt. But it's not the chainsaw approach. The program maps out that within 20 years, Canada would be debt-free.
Why aren't we doing that? It seems like such a simple solution.
That is really, it's a simple question. It's reasonable, and why don't we do it? Why don't the politicians do it? Mm-hmm. It's so, first and foremost, they want to be elected. And any time when they say, look, we cannot do this or that, then whoever promises more will get elected. Mm-hmm. And that's really all the way through. You know, mm-hmm. If you promise more and more, if you promise 7 steaks a week and a case of beer a week, you get elected.
Well, you saw that with the dollar beers in Ontario. Which of the 7 principles is most important to you personally, Frank?
I think they probably all up, but number 1 would be to have balanced budgets. Mm-hmm. Okay, you can't look. Every housewife knows she cannot spend more than what her husband brings in. Right? If she spends more, they wind up in a poorhouse. Every farmer knows they cannot spend more than what he gets for the crops. Otherwise, he loses the farm. every small businesswoman or businessman know they cannot spend more than what they make in profits. Otherwise, they go bankrupt. Okay, so we gotta harness. We gotta limit the politician from making more and more debt. Huh? Okay, so that's an important principle.
Does balancing the budget naturally begin to reduce the debt?
Yes, first you gotta balance the budgets, and then you gotta have a little more that you can pay back a small portion, right? But so you over 20 years, we should be able to have the debt paid back.
You think it's feasible to pay back
the debt? It's feasible if we. The other important thing is to free up small businesses. Small businesses were always the backbone. Okay, this were always, well, the primary reason why people get up in the morning is they want to make a better life for themselves and their family.
100%.
And they think, what do I got to do? If I'm smart, I can get things done earlier or quicker or better, right? So, but the key is we gotta get the red tape off small business, right?
Small business is obviously the backbone of this country. So why is it so difficult, or why have we made it so difficult for small businesses to start to flourish in this country?
Well, we have accumulated super bureaucrats, right? And the super bureaucrats...
How would you define a super bureaucrat?
Well, they're pretty powerful. They have special interest groups, might have played a role that they got into the government, right? Because there is, when you take big pharma and big agri, those are huge special interest groups, and they want to protect their, call it whatever they do, right? And let me just point out, when you think that 95% of the food eaten in Canada or in the United States comes from industrial farms. In industrial farms, you see no more eagles fly. Why? Because there's no more rabbits. There's no more pheasants. We spray so much fungicide and pesticides. We kill everything here. So that is, so they want to make sure, that their interests are kind of kept alive, right? And thereby they spend a lot of money to get bureaucrats in the various departments, right?
So we're literally letting them poison us, poison our children. How do we dismantle that relationship?
Well, it's again why economic charter, right? The economic charter of rights. That's principle number 7 says, no Canadian kid should go to school hungry. That means breakfast got to be served. No Canadian kid should leave the school hungry. That means lunch has got to be served. And by law, the food would have to be organic. But
that's a costly initiative.
Yes, it's costly, but it still would be a lot cheaper than all the medical bills we pay. We pay billions and billions of medical bills. Yes, I think the way we could do it is that family farms will get a subsidy from a family farm fund, right? Because right now, family farms are practically on welfare. Kids of family farmers say, Mom, Dad, I don't want to be in the farming. I don't want to be on welfare. So if we give them a subsidy, which really is not a subsidy, it would bring down the medical bills, okay? So that's a good investment. So that's what we have to do. And because all the kids have allergies, stage 2 diabetics is rising because people have no idea how many chemicals they eat.
Do you think we can, and how can we get people to want to go back into farming, to see it as the noble profession it truly is?
We gotta highlight that. We gotta, we convince kids for many other things which are not really great for kids, right? This is farming would be the most noble thing to do, to provide people with good nutrition and good foods. That's a very noble thing to do, and it would, if done properly, it would be very rewarding for, call it, the kids of family farmers. We gotta make it rewarding, and we gotta make it that it's cool, that it's noble. It's the most noble thing to do, to feed people.
I agree. So what does, you often mention unchaining small business, and we just talked about the super bureaucrats. In practice, what does it mean to unchain small business?
What it means is, I like to make small business aware. If you band together, then you have your political force. If you band together, you could bring it about that you don't have to pay a business tax. Okay? If you don't band together, then you can't, you got to pay.
So small businesses really need to come together to support this.
I think small business, the future of Canada is in the hands of small business. And what I'm trying to get across to them, look, they got kids. Don't you worry about your kids with this gigantic mortgage, the gigantic debt, and things not working. So so we gotta get it across to small business. They gotta play a role. They gotta play a role, a noble role, right? It would be good for them, because usually people all ask, what does any change, any rules or regulation or idea, if it change, how does it affect me? Okay, in that case, an economic charter of rights, as I presented, would be the most beneficial, would be to small business.
Which in turn would be beneficial to the whole nation.
If small business does well, then the whole country would do well.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is really, small business got to realize, if you band together, the Chamber of Commerce and all the other, they haven't done anything for small business. Small business got to realize they're the backbone. And so we got to, when they band together, we could bring it about that they pay no business tax and have no regulators in their factory or in their place of business. Small governments have no business to be in a small business, right? So they got to understand that. But the key is they all will play on the same level playing field, okay? Because when you look at our tax system, the tax system is not the playing field's not level, okay? So we got to understand that.
The tax system is just out of control. It's a book of, 30,000 pages. What would you say?
Well, there are many thousands of pages, many thousands of paragraphs. One is more convoluted than the other, right? It does not serve, but it's...
How do we work to reduce and simplify the tax system when it's so far gone and there's so many interest groups involved in keeping it afloat?
Yeah, we gotta have the tax system is totally out of whack. It's so convoluted.
Yes.
But you have a few 100,000 tax lawyers. They make a great living, right? And because they're always looking for loopholes, so their wealthy clients don't have to pay taxes or very little taxes. We got to change that. There should be no loopholes. There should be black and white, and people should understand what the tax system is.
What is the biggest challenge that you believe in implementing these principles nationwide?
Well, the biggest challenge is to make people aware of it, that that small business has to understand it, and small business has to bring forward then to the people. Don't vote for any politicians if they don't support the economic charter, because it's the economic charter which will put a discipline on the politicians, right? The two disciplines are, you must eliminate the debt and you must have balanced budgets. And the other one is, you have no business interfering with small business. Let small business, let them be alone, let them work. They've done great. The last 50 or 60 or 70, 80 or 100 years ago, Canada did great because small business practically had a totally free run.
It's often said, Frank, that you may be the last of the Frank Stronachs because Canada is not fertile for business. Do you think that's the case currently?
I'm worried about it, and that's why I'm really putting so much effort in. This is a great country, great people, and we let it slide. Okay, so we really got to wake up now. We got to wake up. We got to do something, right? And I have no agenda. I have a certain age, like I'm, so I'm working hard. My conscience tells me I gotta transmit, call it the knowledge I accumulated and the experience I accumulated for younger generations. And I built a company under great, what we call the fair enterprise system, right? So I should mention it the very key to it, it's an evolutionary process, right? When I arrived in Toronto in 1955, I had $200 in my pocket, and I didn't know anybody.
And you were able to turn that around, no connections, no money, into a $40 billion multinational business.
Yes, I found a job in a small tool shop, right? There were about 10 people. The owner said to me, Frank, after a few months, Frank, you're doing a great job. I want you to be a partner of mine. My chest swelled a little, but he was a nice guy. He didn't wrote it down. Mm-hmm. So I looked around. I got a job. I got paid a lot more. And
is that what inspired you to start your own business?
No, he didn't fire me. I quit.
No. Is that what inspired you?
What inspired me, it said there's nothing to it to run a business, right? And again, all people, they want to get up in the morning and accumulate some money so people can live in dignity and help their families.
What was your drive then?
My drive was never to be hungry again, right? And not crawl and be a proud person, be a free person, right? Be economically free. If you're not economically free, you're a servant.
And you've experienced freedom as we have in Canada without being economically free, where you were hungry.
Yes, I was free to be hungry.
Exactly,
okay.
Exactly.
So
you know very well.
So that has a great bearing, and that my conscience tells me, Frank, life's been so good to you, You've been blessed with good health and a good mind. Do something, transmit what you accumulated for the younger generation, and let's turn this country around. And an hopeful politician will come to me and say, Frank, can you explain it a little better, the economic charter, so we can put it in our foundation, in part of the Constitution, right? It should be in the Constitution.
And this is a non-partisan movement.
It's a non-partisan movement, but again, it's new. That's why if a politician will bring it forward, it won't move, because the other politician will criticize it. If I'm as a non-politician bring it forward, look, they can't criticize me.
No.
What I've done,
No.
and I could in clear numbers, in clear pictures, I could demonstrate why this thing works, right? But if politicians will bring it forward, right? Okay, politicians could say, yes, we like the economic charter, we gotta vote for it, right? Okay?
And so that's why it needs to be a grassroots initiative.
That's why it's got to be grassroots, right? It won't work any other way.
And do you think that the charter can unite people who are polarized because of party lines?
Look, because it clearly would demonstrate that right now the very rich don't want to share with the working class, and the divide is getting bigger, right? So the economic charter of rights would improve the living standards, right, for the working class enormously. You know, and after a while, it will be there that they could afford to buy homes again. But most of all, to reach economic freedom.
And you believe 2/3 of Canadians could reach economic freedom?
You got to work, right? If you don't work, right?
Of course.
Yes, if you don't work, no Canadian should go hungry, right? If you got no money as a Canadian citizen, you should have, or as any citizen living in the country, you should have access to a soup kitchen, right? Or to still your hunger, right? And you should have a shelter. But those are the minimum standards of a civilized society. But that's not. The economic charter left it very simple. Let's get the economy going, right? And we could eliminate poverty.
And then we can focus on other social issues. And finally, Frank, do you think Canadians are ready for a new economic vision like the economic charter?
I think the question is just if we could get to them, if we look, you could have the best formula, but if the public is not aware of it, right, then it's okay. So that's why I like to, I'd like to talk to people which will be willing to form an economic advisory committee, and we like to present it to the municipalities, to the towns, to the mayor and the councillors, to say, look, you
they're the closest to the people.
Yeah, most of all, they're closest to the problems.
Yeah.
Because Ottawa, Ottawa, they only have bureaucrats there. Yes, there are laundries, there are food suppliers, which are donuts, but they all supply the bureaucrats and the thing. But basically, otherwise, there's nothing happens. So they are not really. They are not aware or will suffer under those problems, right? But in this municipality, if in City Hall a lot of people line up, look, we're hungry, we have no place to go, we have no shelter, that is, so the cities are burdened with the problems where the politicians must correct. The economic charter will correct it, okay? But if we leave it, look, the problems get bigger and bigger and bigger. Look, it's written all over the map, okay? So we must get things done, and so I'd like to. You don't have to be a business. Just a little common sense will say, look, that's what we should do, right? And they could form committees and press the towns. Look, support the economic charter. And
so
if all the towns support the economic charter, then the politicians have no other road than way out than to adopt the economic charter and its constitution.
That's amazing. That's amazing. The municipalities will be the vehicles to get the economic charter fortified.
That's grassroots, right? So we're gonna start. We're gonna get enough people to form committees, and they would then make a presentation to the mayor and the councillors. Look, the economic charter so clearly indicates that it benefits all Canadians, also the rich, but mainly the working class will get a huge uplift. That's what it's. We gotta get the working. The divide between it is too, and we're not preaching to take away from the rich. All what we're saying is we must let workers participate. When you bake the economic pie, everybody will get a bigger slice, even the rich. But the key is the workers they serve. and have a moral right to some slices of the pie, of the economic pie.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you. This was very insightful. If you'd like to join, please sign up at economiccharter.ca, become an ambassador, engage with us, start a board in your municipality. Let's start putting pressure on the municipalities, and let's change the trajectory of this great nation and get us back on a strong economic footing. Once again, thank you, Frank Stronach, for putting forward solutions to bringing back prosperity to Canada. Thank you.
Okay, great. It's great to serve a great country. So I've always said it doesn't matter how smart you are. If the stars are not aligned, it won't work. But I do hope it works, that people will realize it's grassroots, it's simple to understand. Get on the bandwagon. We gotta get the living standards improved in Canada, right? And we can do it if we band together. Thank you. Nice to be with you again. Look forward for next week to do another episode.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for joining us.